All right, guys, I'm just going to give my final thoughts on this major day in college sports. I mean, it's not just college football, but it's also college basketball with USC and UCLA. And why is this so bad for just overall the health of college football and stuff like that? I understand people are going to say, well, we're going to get great matchups now. USC is going to face Ohio State. USC is going to go to face Michigan. If you wanted great matchups every year, you could completely redo how we do the non-conference schedule. Instead of scheduling our non-conference games 10 years in advance, maybe you only schedule them 2 or 3 years and you force Power 5 teams to have home and home games every single year, and you expand the playoff to 12 teams. Look at Michigan. Michigan is a perfect example of why the playoff needs to be expanded. Michigan used to play home and homes with Notre Dame. They used to have tough non-conference games. The issue is they kept losing a big non-conference game, and then when you have one loss in a 4-team playoff, you have zero margin for error in conference. So if you lose one non-conference game and then you lose to Ohio State, you're out of the playoff. Go look at Michigan's non-conference schedule this year. They got scared. They didn't schedule anyone. If you expanded the playoff to 12 teams and you forced teams to play a Power 5 home and home game, teams would be much more willing to schedule home and homes between Ohio State and Alabama, schedule home and homes between Michigan and Texas, and you could legitimately have 2 massive non-conference games every year, because if you have a 12-team playoff, guys, I don't want to go on a rant why we need a 12-team playoff, but I'm just saying this could have been avoided. But in the end, guys, it's all about money. And this is a situation. I was just thinking about this. In one sentence to summarize this situation: it makes no sense. This is the equivalent of the Los Angeles Chargers being in the same division as the Cleveland Browns. It just makes no sense. It makes no sense. It's clear this was just done for revenue. And again, I don't want to hate on the SEC, but let's be honest. The SEC was the best conference by far, not even close, undisputed in college football. You've got 3 ridiculous elite recruiting teams in Texas A&M, Alabama, and Georgia. And you poached the 2 best teams from the Big 12. And the Big 10 has to respond, and it's this whole sentiment, we can't get left in the dust, and now it just gets worse and worse, and now we're going to see UCLA travel to New Jersey and face Rutgers in a 12 o'clock, Eastern noon game. Imagine that. Yeah, that's a real conference. Guys, it's ridiculous. I understand there's pros to it. Having these big matchups, bringing in USC, it's going to make it more entertaining. But just overall for the health of the sport, seeing the Power 5 die like this, it really is sad, and it could have been avoided with a playoff if you expanded the playoff to 12 teams earlier, and if you made these teams, you didn't schedule non-conference games 10 years out, maybe 1 year out, maybe 2 years out, you schedule the home and home non-conference games. Force every Power 5 team to play at least one home and home every single year. If you have a 12-team playoff, it gives these teams room for error, so they're more likely going to do it. They're not going to be gun-shy scheduling a non-conference team because they know if they lose that big look at what happened to Ohio State last year. They lost to Oregon. They have no room for error. You lose to Michigan, you're done. You expand it to 12 teams, something different happens, guys. The playoff will be expanded to 12 teams in 2025. That is guaranteed going to happen with the latest conference movement, because now you've got 2 stacked conferences, and we're going to discuss everything tomorrow more in detail. What happens to Notre Dame? That's one of the big questions. Another big question, what happens to Oregon? And then also, does the Pac-12 become sort of a sub-conference, if that's even a thing, to where now you've got the 2 mega conferences, maybe you've got 3 sub-conferences, and then you've got the group of 5 conferences. The 2 mega conferences being the SEC and the Big 10, and then you've got the ACC, the Pac-12, who had its 2 teams poached, and the Big 12, who had its 2 teams poached, and they're replacing it with 4 teams from the American Conference. But it's almost like now you've got a big 2, a middle 3, and then the group of 5. And maybe I'm looking at it wrong, but right now, that's what it feels like it is. And none of this is totally set in stone. We could get more teams joining the Big Ten, and there has been rumors on my last video of 2 major super conferences, which makes no sense. How does a super conference where you have 20 teams make sense? How would that, I don't even know how that would look like. Do you have multiple conference championship games within the same conference if you have 24 teams in one conference? Do you not have any conference championship games? I don't know how that would work exactly, but I do know the playoff is getting expanded. I do know this is all done for money, and the Big Ten is going to say this is a response to what the SEC did, because let's be real. Again, how many times the SEC was already the best conference and they add the 2 best teams from the Big 12? Like, come on. And the Big Ten has to do something. I would have loved to see the Big Ten stay more geographically, maybe take Notre Dame, although Notre Dame probably doesn't want to join any conference right now. We'll see what Notre Dame does. That's another thing. Does Notre Dame help the ACC and join the ACC? Maybe then we could have a Big 3 if the ACC is able to poach more teams, maybe from the new Big 12. I don't know, guys. I'm just spitballing on what's going to happen. But the things that we know are happening right now, Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC, probably in 2024. UCLA and USC joining the Big Ten, very likely in 2024. The playoff gets expanded in 2025 to 12 teams. So that's my prediction. That's very likely what's going to happen. And it just honestly makes zero sense. The ideal thing, if you have a 12-team playoff, you make teams play big non-conference games, you have more revenue that way, instead of doing this where you create these ridiculous artificial conferences and you've got, in the same conference, 2 teams from California and a team from New Jersey, because that is real legitimate. This is La La Land. This is a joke, folks. This is not, you might as well just have it completely free and open. I mean, NFL teams don't do this. NBA teams, well, NBA is a little bit different, but like this is like the San Francisco Giants being in the same division as the Atlanta Braves. This just does not make sense, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Cleveland Indians and the Dodgers or the Guardians, and the Dodgers being in the same division. It just doesn't make any sense. You're doing it for money. It's disgusting and it's ruining the sport. And it's completely unhealthy, inorganic. You know what this is like? This is like when they overfeed those pigs because you got a nice big pig and you want to get more fat. So you purposefully overfeed it, make it extremely obese, and then kill it so you've got more fat. This is the same thing. You're adding teams to your conference. It's completely unhealthy, inorganic way to run college football, but you're doing it because you make more revenue. When you make that pig fat and you kill it, it's completely unhealthy and it's horrible, but you're going to make more money because there's more fat on the pig. UCLA and USC joining the Big Ten. There's more money to be made in these matchups. And again, they're going to say, well, it's a response to the SEC. I get it. I think the SEC is originally to blame for this because they got greedy when they were the best conference and they wanted even more money and they wanted their league to get an even bigger TV deal. So they bring on Texas and Oklahoma, and that's just going to make them more money. And now the Big Ten gets an excuse and says, we have to counter this. This is the modern way of college football now. And now we have our domino effect. Starting with Texas and Oklahoma, then you've got the 4 teams going from the American to the Big 12, and then you've got USC and UCLA. I don't even know why I have my hand like here, but it's just like a domino going to the Big 10. So that's just my final take. Again, we'll see what happens if anything else happens with these other teams. If you're a Oregon fan, that would be a team where I would be confused because it looks like the Pac-12 is kind of becoming a sub-conference. That's the nickname I came up with. Just kind of like you have 2 major conferences, 3 sub-conferences, and then group of 5 conferences. Right now, that's how I see it. Maybe Oregon is already in talks to join the Big Ten. I don't know, guys. You'd have to ask the people on Twitter. I don't know, but if I was an Oregon fan, I'd be like, we're the one team that's getting left behind in the Big 12 there's really no other major team outside of Texas and Oklahoma. I mean, Baylor's not. There's really no other major team that would be getting left behind with Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC. There's also been maybe Stanford goes to the Big Ten due to their good academics. The Big Ten could like that. It's just all speculation. How many teams does the Big Ten want to add? That's the real question. And I think the two main ones I would look at, maybe even including Stanford due to their academics, but I would look at Washington and Oregon. Those would be the two main teams I would look at. And then what does Notre Dame do? It's always a situation with them. Do they try and join the Big Ten? Do they try and prop up the ACC? It'll be interesting to follow, guys, but that's just a final little thoughts here. I got to take a break from this and stuff like that. So that's just my final thoughts on the major announcement today, UCLA and USC, because this is completely realistic, guys. That's what this is. Oh, yeah, this is realistic. We've got a team from California traveling to Pennsylvania. You know what? Maybe we'll get a USC Penn State whiteout. I mean, they're cool matchups. Don't get me wrong. Anytime you have something new, it's cool. And the other thing I quickly want to say, I always try and be self-aware enough to understand that we as human beings hate change. So, and this is what I try and explain to people when they say they want to stay at the 14 playoff. Your first thought is, no, 12 teams is too much. We don't want that. When in reality, human beings don't like change. So, we don't like UCLA and USC joining the Big Ten because it's change. But I thought about it and I was just like, no, it's just stupid. That's why we don't like it. It makes no sense. It's just money. That's all it is. That's the only logical thing. And then they're like, we want to compete with the SEC. When the playoff expands to 12 teams, that won't be an issue. That will not be a problem. They just want more money for the TV deals, guys. They want more prestige, right? Being able to negotiate a TV deal with two major Power 5 programs from the state of California, that makes it a lot more fun for every team in the conference because they all get a cut of that TV deal. Rutgers is getting a cut of that. Maryland is getting a cut of that. How about Maryland versus UCLA seems like a realistic matchup. I don't know why. But guys, that's enough of that. I'm done. Make sure you're following me on Twitter, though. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.